the gallery. I've got some questions I know for Stephen about particular works, or about the feelings and thoughts of the show. But please ask questions. It's a great opportunity. If you can't hear or want to revisit a particular piece, by all means, that's also what we're here to do. So, Stephen is yours for the evening.
Well, that's tall order. Thank you, Cody, and Jeremy for hanging the show. Jeremy's also an amazing artist, runs CPO. You see his work over there. You can go online. I believe there's a gallery here. If you go on the Cider Gallery, there's some art for sale for some of the other local artists that are terrific that have shown here in the past. Barry Fitzgerald, for example, had a big show here. Was it last year? With the students. It was terrific. And I just thought, since it's 3 generations and I'm only representing one, it's much more interesting to then just sort of sit and gab at you about things. But what are your interests and that kind of thing? I will stay at the beginning of, just ask, well, how did I want to be an artist? How does that happen? There is the genetic factor, of course. But the portrait of the man there in charcoal with the beard, I loved that as a boy. I had that in my bedroom all growing up, and I marveled at the fact that how could anybody make a drawing so beautiful with burnt charcoal and an eraser? And so that was a huge inspiration for me. And so going to KU, eventually to France, my junior year abroad, I wanted to learn how to draw like that, and all my professors said no. Why do you want to draw like that? I really kind of do. And then it wasn't until I was in Bordeaux at the Beaux-Arts, and I asked one of the professors, and they said, well, in 1968, all the art students destroyed the buildings and the plaster cast, and they had enough of the academic training. And of course, the professor said, we're still waiting to see what they did better. And so anyway, I asked him about how to draw like that, and he came out with this huge roll of academic drawings from the 19th century, and he said, go through these and pick out a couple, and I'll teach you how to draw. So I picked out this fellow there, you can see him into the back. He was holding a big box, and I liked it it was just beautifully rendered, so I put it on my bedroom wall, and I used the plumb line, which you have like a monofilament and a key or something, and then you try to get the figure that fits on the page from the very top for the bottom, and that was part of the exercise. And I used the particular paper and charcoal to create that. So it's fun to see the juxtaposition of that piece with my grandfather's next to it, which was the exact same kind of prompt. And these drawings, the charcoal academic drawings by my grandfather, was done at the Chicago Art Institute in the 20s. He studied under Leon Kroll. Some of you may know Leon Kroll's in a lot of collections around the country. And my grandfather eventually had his first wife, Mary, and the portrait of Mary is in the corner there. She was a model, and she also posed for Leon Kroll and many other notable painters in the 30s that you'll see in museums and stuff. Her face is quite iconic. And they were quite the couple at the time. She was very outgoing, very pretty, very social, and my dad, grandpa, was a quiet, more introverted Swedish-American painter, and they made a great duo going around getting private commissions, portrait commissions, that kind of thing. Eventually ending up in Paris due to a big Lathrop scholarship and a Guggenheim fellowship, where they had a raucously good time until she left, and that was another story. Anyway, that's some sort of the beginnings. The other thing I had in my bedroom was a small watercolor of abstract, and on the back of it, my mom, who's here tonight, wrote Stephen H3 Elephant. And it's great because we all did paintings like this. It's just, kids just making color and fun with paint and paper. And I love it because it's between the academic realism of the drawing and the expressionistic abandonment of color represents my love of art, the rainbow of potentiality of making something visual and exciting. And I think we all want to, go back to that freedom of being a child. And that's why the children's books that you see some of the examples over there reflect my childlike curiosity about basically chasing ideas. I don't really create tons of product for the sake of product. I chase an idea, so it could be a robot or a mural for a subway if I'm lucky enough to get that commission. And so I have the ideas that prompt the technique. How do you solve the idea? I think of it a lot in terms of like if you're a movie director, if you're writing a movie, you know, look at Spielberg, makes Jaws and Schindler's List. Why not do both? They're really amazing films, completely different ways of telling a story. And that's sort of the way I work. The difficulty is, how do I represent myself and how do others see me and how do I get a job? Because I'm all over the map. And that makes things a little bit difficult. Anyway, so growing up, my dad would do life drawings, and I'm really happy to go back and have found some of his drawings in Princeton, where we lived for a couple of years. And some of the gestural ones, he was sort of on fire with that, and his drawings were very much influenced by Peter Paul Rubens. Some of you know Rubens' drawings. They have this wonderful energy and very wispy lines. And so he influenced me in that regards with life drawing, as well as my grandfather. So you can see things like these. And then what to do for a show like this. Originally it was the idea, because we just had the celebration of life here Thursday night for my father who passed away in the fall. And talking to Jeremy, was like, wouldn't it be great to have to show my dad's drawings at the same time? He said, yeah, but unfortunately this was booked. And then somebody canceled, so miracles happen. And so then, of course, my father doesn't have as much work as I do, or my grandfather's, and then he came up with a great idea to do a three-generation show. So then what do you show? So I used those sort of more of my realistic work, none of my abstract kind of interpretations of ideas, to coincide with my grandfather's and dad's work. So it was this jigsaw puzzle of finding frames and taking things out of frames and reframing and that kind of thing. As all of you know, sometimes the art is a good deal and the frame costs twice as much. So that is part of the deal of having a show. And it was marvelous coming in here with over 80, maybe 100 pieces, and then I let Jeremy just sort of do his thing, as he does so well with all the shows, and just let him run. And it's really great to see the juxtaposition of the work, the styles, the content, and that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of a prelude to anything you might have as a question that I can respond to.
Stephen, I have kind of leading into that.
Okay.
When you initially pulled those 80 to 100 pieces, you know, were you having conversations with your grandfather and father through art and kind of thinking of what do you want to show? You know, you had mentioned, you know, where do you start, and you chose some more realistic, figurative pieces of your work to kind of talk on the walls. Yeah, how did that go? How did you feel?
That's a great question. How do I feel about looking through the work? It's a complex question.
Yes, sorry.
And the answer is emotional. It's also kind of familiar. I've seen this work so long. And then what I found with my grandfather's and mine, and then how do I bring Dad into it? So for example, this watercolor and some of these are from these lovely sketchbooks that Mom and Dad, when they did all their travels over all these different wonderful places, so Dad would sit and do these watercolors as they're having a cocktail or whatever, and Mom's finally sort of bored with this whole thing. And then lo and behold, she starts doing watercolors too, and they're really good. And you know, she's not a trained artist. Oh, maman. And so it's delightful. So you know, here's Cuba, here's Vietnam, or whatever. There's Cambodia. There's all these wonderful drawings and watercolors. So I wanted to represent that. Plus, I had the frames that were. So it's about sort of mixing and matching, and then finding some works that came to me, people like, I think, this one over there, got a call from a woman in Ohio who had a couple of my grandfather's watercolors, and she said, "Are you the grandson?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, would you like them?" I said, "Of course." And so things like that appear out of nowhere, which is magical. But there's a point where how much work can one own, and the inventory, it's very difficult being an artist and in publishing, because it's an enormous amount of inventory of books, of paper, of art, and then of course my dad with his art and his massive amounts of slides and books and that kind of thing. But anyway, thank you for the question.
Yeah, I feel like when I walk through here, it's just a really nice, I feel very comfortable in this space. It feels very much like I'm in someone's personal life, and I think what it is it's all of your work and the years and all of that kind of cultivating and kind of giving that energy to this space. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and the atmosphere here has that historic texture. And as I mentioned the other night, one of my new words that I love working on my dad's talk the other night is the idea of flavor, and it happened to be something I was found through the taste buds of food, but really the flavor is about everything. The flavor is the texture of the wood or the stone or the sentiment that we have, the experience. That's the flavor of character. All of us have this a certain character. We know each other socially, we know each other in privately. We all have these other layers to us, like this building has layers. We're all filled with layers, we sort of are known. What I love about Lawrence is we're all known, okay, you teach at KU or you own a shop or whatever. But then you go, oh my God, you actually teach skydiving? And you're a sushi chef? Oh, I didn't know that. So we all have these other things that we do that are just as important, but they're hidden in a way from our community, and then it's delightful when we find that out, and we're putting in bands or whatever it may be. So, yeah. Megan has a question.
I have a question. So, as I walk around and look at this, and I'm wondering what kind of revelations you've had or experienced as you put together the, as you grouped these paintings, and did you find that in fact you were influenced or you weren't influenced, by your father, by your grandfather? I'm just kind of interested if you had any revelations.
Any revelations?
Yeah.
Can I bounce on this question?
Yeah.
Because thanks to you, I discovered the word conversation. Okay, so that means that different artworks do communicate and talk to each other between different countries, different period of time, different artists. And I'm sure that you remember about some paintings or some artworks from your father or your grandfather, but now you have them on the wall. So that means perhaps this is something that you were hinting, is that are you discovering something? Are you realizing that you have done some artworks that were inspired unconsciously by something that you have been seeing before? And how do you react to see all of this, all these artworks close to each other?
Yeah, so conversation about the art that you see on the wall, or how I was thinking about putting it on the wall. I think there's a certain honesty in the fact that I've seen it a lot, so that the conversation that I've already had prior to here, what's most exciting is the conversations that you all have as you see the juxtaposition, the compositions, like, wow, these are a lot of different things happening here, right? And so the conversation that this wall creates is exciting and dynamic. And to answer your question too, is sort of I had a curatorial kind of a hat on, so how does this work? I have enough of these, maybe there's too many nudes, is that okay in portrait? I have some very nice portraits I did in oil in New York, and we just took them away that didn't quite make sense, and more basketball figurative work like that. So it's kind of a curatorial aspect of it, if you will. Yeah. But conversations are great because as you go to the Spencer or the Kemper Museum or Zico, everything on the wall is a conversation, right? And it's like, whoa, how does that look next to each other? And framing, in fact, the framing is fascinating. So, what is here's a very older mat, but a bright modern frame, a modern black frame. And if you frame something differently, it changes the whole personality of it. I've collected gold leaf frames and things. So, I don't know, like the oil over there by my grandfather, that's a French 19th century gold leaf frame underneath there. And at the time, it was very in style to then cover that gold leaf, calm it down with a sort of a gesso type of covering to just quiet the frame. It's no longer that kind of gold leaf deal, but underneath that, it's a beautiful molded French frame from the turn of the century. And so if we took that painting out and put it in something else, it would be a very different conversation. And a painting that's not on view here is I have a couple Bob Sudlows, right? And Bob, I love his work on paper, and I bought this one years ago, and I put it in a gold frame thinking, oh, this is gonna be like a little courbet, but it's not, it's really a Bob. And so, but what's really cool is he had taped the edges, and then he wrote the date and some stuff on it, and I'd love to just take it back out of that frame and just float it in a steel modern frame. It would change the whole look. But guess what Bob did? He didn't sign it. It took him 6 months to go back to the gallery and sign it. Guess what he did? It's a snow scene. He took this black paint and went, Sudlow! And I'm like, oh my God. So it's mine now. So and I'm an artist. I just took the X-Acto knife and started scraping. I missed Sudlow, so you could see it, but my snow was still there, right? So, I have a David Levine, quite a few David Levines, and one he never painted a mouth in the model. One day I had a martini, I painted the mouth. It's okay.
More conversations,
Yeah,
right? More conversations in
There
a
you go.
different way.
There's one back there.
Oh,
This is a little related to Megan. I'm just wondering, when you were going through this vast amount of work, whether your fathers or grandfathers, and looking at your own too, were there any unexpected discoveries?
I think in the back of frames, particularly my grandfather's, where there's some notes of some handwriting, maybe some labels. Back of frames are really, really interesting. And I'm drawing a blank on the artist. What's his name? It's a Brazilian artist. He's wonderful. He had a great show in New York years ago, and I mean, he's got the money to do this. They went and they took pictures of the crossing of the Delaware, and maybe La Gioconda, maybe the Mona Lisa, the back of the frames, and they recreated the entire back of the frame with labels and all the different subtleties and marks and tarnishes, and they leaned them all against the gallery wall. And so in your mind, you have to see the painting, and it doesn't matter anymore. It's sort of like, wow, the frames themselves. I thought it was a brilliant idea. They'll come to me, the guy who did it. Anyway, so that's kind of, the discoveries are that kind of thing. Or just yesterday, one of my dad's watercolor blocks, I opened up and some drawings of his fell out. I was looking for them for this show. They're a lovely pen and inks done in the 1950s, and they're terrific. It's like, oh my God, Dad could really draw with pen and ink, So that's the kind of discoveries that are lovely that you can find. So we all have these sort of hidden things, You all probably find notes from high school or college. You're like, wow, I forgot that paper. Maybe I should forget about that paper. But I think that that's the most interesting thing. Yeah.
How do you relate to photography with your work? Do you do photos at all in order to plan something?
So how do we relate to photography? Very much in terms of reference. So for example, the Scrooge portraits, I did those when I was living in New York, and we had a family friend who posed as Scrooge, George Day. He was wonderful. He was 6'3", gangly. He was a performance artist, a mathematician, and he could ham it up. So if you look at the Stake Norman Rockwell, for example, when he had people pose, you really have to over-exaggerate your facial expressions, and then to translate it into a painting, you calm it down and you take an eye from here and a mouth from here and you kind of make it happen. So that's what I did, and I handmade a nightshirt for George because I needed something like that, and then a hat, and then I took a bunch of pictures. This was before in the internet and all that, and 1 hour photo. And like the George Mason over there, that was 3 pieces of photo reference that I put together, a face and a top and a leg kind of thing, just to get a dynamic pose. for that usually. So that's the use of photography. And of course, documenting for your website and that kind of thing. But, yeah. Some other thoughts or questions? This is neat. So one of the things I wanted to have is also have a show of the dad's portraits throughout the years. And the big portrait with his robe and all that, I did that when I was represented by Portraits Inc. It's a gallery on Park Avenue, New York. I never got many commissions because my heart wasn't into it. I kind of moved on to children's books, but I wanted a big showcase painting, you know, to kind of, that's what you do. You do a lot of deans, and you do a lot of corporate people. And so there's that. When I came back to Lawrence, he had his KU, I had him dress up in his KU outfit and took a bunch of pictures again. Holding the mortar board. He loved the idea of the mortar board because of the idea of what is mortar and what is the idea of learning and you know, like right here, all this is mortar between the bricks, and so mortar is the idea between one stone and another. That's a student learning, and how do they grow, and what's bound, how do you bound an idea, how do you develop your own intellect, and how do you go out to the world. Yeah.
I'm curious if you can share the time that you knew you were destined to be an artist, like your grandfather and father, as a young person, I assume. Can you just speak to that awakening?
So the awakening of when did I want to really think about being an artist? I'll sort of do that in maybe 3 quick parts. I played in a rock band in high school, which is my priority, and then I went to KU on a drawing track, which doesn't even exist anymore, I think. And does it exist? I don't know. It's very, I don't know. I don't think so. So then my second year walking back to Hashinger Hall, was walking with a fellow student, and he goes, hey, there's these illustration classes where they give you an assignment and you do a piece of art. I'm like, well, that sounds great. I have no ideas. And then I did that, and then I went to France for my junior year, and I really grew up as a young person. I brought my electric guitar ready to rock out. Oh my God, my musical taste went completely out the window. Whole different stuff, traveling, I never played again. But I knew when I came back, I would have Tom Allen, a colleague of ours, and I'd have to really work hard. I did it 2 senior years. I did an illustration and a painting track because I love both areas. But again, I had nothing to say. I had Sima Katz, some of you may remember Sima. She said, Steve, I got so many ideas and no time. And I'm like, man, I could have time but no ideas. And so illustration helped give me an idea, right? And then, so anyway, so even like that piece over there, the lithograph of the Symbolist, I did that for Sima, and I kind of knocked it out on a stone, and she goes, Steve, you know, that's an okay piece. I mean, it's clear that you could draw, but there's no ideas. And if that's all you do, you're just a guy that draws well. And I'm like, oh gosh, whoa. But she was right. And now I've got tons of ideas, right? So that's what happens as we mature. And so then the transformation of what I really wanted to become an artist, full throttle, was my senior. I pushed really hard. I had a show at Cornucopia and Paradise Cafe. In fact, Vicki Douglas is here. There's Vicki. She bought one piece there from the show. I started showing my work to magazines. I did Alumni Magazine, Illustrations, Kansas City Star before I even graduated. I was just a super hungry young person. And then I knew that I had to move to New York to see if I could do album covers and time covers and things like that. So there's sort of a leap of faith that you have to do. I think with everything in life, we have a certain sort of a momentum. There's timing, there's luck, there's connections, it all has to happen, and sometimes it doesn't happen, sometimes it does happen, but that was that young person drive where you're not bogged down with a lot of attachments. You can go and do that kind of thing. So, and since then, I think the career's always ebb and flow. There's passion, and there's like discouragement. There's like, oh God, and then there's renewed. I think that's what I circle back to the thing of an idea. So the idea is gold. If you're writing a song or producing a movie, what's really hooked with? How do you get hooked? You know, and then inspired by other artists and seeing somebody tell our human experience in such a way that we kind of go, wow, I never thought about that, and that's so cool. And then you get inspired anew, and social media sometimes can be overwhelming by the enormity of talent in the world, and then you kind of get super excited and pretty bummed out, and then you gotta find your purpose again and take it from there. I don't know if that's sort of a long trajectory. So a show like this is very exciting. It'll come down, it'll go into storage, it'll be on walls in my place, and then I'll make room for new work. And that's kind of the journey of an artist, and many of us in this room, colleagues and friends that are artists, know exactly what I'm talking about. And, yeah, I don't know if there's other things, but there's so much fun. Yeah.
So, you mentioned that you had conversations with these paintings, like way before this moment in time, and I loved hearing that I don't remember the name of it, but that hung in your room. I was really captivated when I saw that the other day, and it totally makes sense because I can sort of see how your grandfather may have influenced you. I was wondering if there's one or two of your fathers or your grandfathers in this room that you would be willing to share, like what kind of, or one of them that's influenced you, or that you've had kind of those conversations with in the past.
Well, what are the like drawings by my dad that really were profound to me? I really love this torso right here. It's so simple. I think some of his best work he did on newsprint, where you just get this open gestural feeling, very Rubenesque. And then there's a life drawing here, and then over there, the gestures of the form. So these are probably, maybe 2-minute poses perhaps, and then the model moves, but he keeps the drawing going on a singular piece of paper, and it creates almost an abstract dance to it. Those kind of rhythmic drawings I think are really strong, as well as sort of these blue nudes, male nudes that are doing the same kind of dance on a page. So it's not a static, one singular image of a figure, it's a movement, it's a dance, and then the intertwining of the marks become a much greater sum, the synergy of that I think is really, really dynamic and powerful. So both of those, contrasted with, there you are, with the pieces. And I should say, so the portrait of the gentleman and the other gentleman, we have those were society people that would come in and pose probably for a week at a time, because it takes a long time to do these. And if you see at the bottom there's an I and an H and an M, and so the professor's going over and grading them. So that the I is like first place and the HM is honorable mention, and then if you look up closely, you'll see the thumbtacks where they keep putting their thumbtacks in there. And as I understand it, the better the student, the better the position in the room to see the model, which gives you a better outcome because you're not drawing just a chair and a butt. And they're really fascinating humans. We have a beautiful portrait of a woman in charcoal and an elderly man, another man. It's terrific. And they're all based on geometry. So form is based on abstract sort of geometrical shapes, and you build it up, and then the student has their own stylistic way of rendering. And many times they'll get the charcoal and they have to sit there and maybe have like 15 sticks of charcoal at the ready because they get dull quickly. And then they're built up layer, and then the idea of verticality, and then you can take a kneaded eraser. Sometimes in France they would use the big baguette, and then you take the middle of the baguette out, and it makes a terrific eraser. And don't eat it, and beware the next day it's hard, and it'll make all kinds of indentations to your papers and want to get rid of it. But it's terrific. And then they use a certain fixative, so there's some drawings on the back of these. We don't have the drawings. In fact, there's a beautiful portrait of a Native American Indian with the headdress and all that, and we don't know where it is. But the ghost image is lovely, and it's the fixative that has transferred the charcoal on the back of some of our drawings. And those haunting ghost images are actually really lovely, They could be shown in their own right. The memory of something too, which is really kind of powerful. Lisa.
I'm sorry, I don't know how old you were with your grandfather. Like, did they actually teach, your father and grandfather actually teach you anything? Did you work with them, or were you just inspired by seeing their work?
Yeah, so, did my grandfather and father teach me art or anything? So, I never knew my grandfather. My mom was pregnant with me at the time of his death. And so, just looking at the work was the key. My father was very proud and possessive of the art, and he had a delicate relationship with my grandfather too, so I think he projected a lot of his desires to know his dad through art and looking at it deeply and having this connection that he, I think, lacked in a human, personal way. So these paintings were very, very precious to us. So during the tornadoes, I mentioned this the other night, we carried these things down to the basement all the time. It was quite some of these big paintings of these big old frames, you know, tornado in the basement, here we go. So that was neat. And Dad's gift to me and my sister is that he had no ego in his art, so that he allowed us to be creative in a natural, supportive way. Whereas, you know, if you look at the Wyeths and other families, there's lots of complicity of who's more famous and who's this, and he had absolutely zero ego in that, which is a beautiful gift.
Nice, thanks.
And I think that, well, I don't know, I have lots of thoughts. This is a lovely opportunity to have had this show. It's neat to see it once more tonight. It's the last time. And if you're interested in any of these or any other work, just let the gallery know and me. But it's all, eventually I have a website of my grandfather, jtheodorjohnson.com, and I'll be adding more content over the years, and I'll bring my dad into it as well. And so his work will be up online. I don't know if we have any of his work in the archives, but we did have, I did have a big show at the Albert Kemper Museum 2 years ago. It was my work and other people's work, and they do have a lovely drawing of my dad's. They have some of mine and my grandfather's as well. So there's a family in a museum, which is neat. Maybe we'll get some of the Spencer, who knows, or other places. But the most important thing is that you have art that you like and you love to live with it. You look at it. I rotate work, and art is also a lovely gift. You all know my Alphabet City book, right? Well, you don't have to know my book. So I had just finished it in Brooklyn. I was living in Brooklyn Heights, and then I was working with Exhibits USA in Kansas City on a touring show at the time. And then also I get a call from Paul Simon's assistant. Hey, this is blah, 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 and Paul wants to buy a letter. And I'm like, I don't really want to sell these things right now. Well, anyway, so after yoga, he did yoga in Brooklyn. He came over with his entourage, and we had a lovely time. I was making vanilla nut coffee at the time. We had a cup of coffee. We talked, and he said, well, I really want to buy the letter O for my wife for Christmas. And so I said, well, I made him like give it up for like 4 years. He goes, 3 years. I said, 4 years. I said, 3 years. Okay. And the show never transpired, but it was a wonderful visit with him. And then eventually he called me on Christmas and said it was a great, Edie Burkell was delighted. And again, it speaks to, when you're Paul Simon, you can have anything, right? But art is still something you can give and it has a different kind of value. It's not monetary. And if you do something handmade, you know, Anne makes amazing handmade cards, and I think Anne Patterson and her own work. And Anne, I'm sorry I missed your talk at KU the other day, but so we all have these talents that we can do, and even if it's a simple something, I think the preciousness and the effort of making it. We don't have to be artists to do it. You know, to sing a little jingle or record it and send it to somebody. It's all good. It's all a positive affirmation of who we are as human beings and how we want to give back. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a scenario. Tornado warning. You can grab one painting if you're
Man.
That's not fair.
Yep, 10 seconds.
Man, you know, that is just going to be whatever's nearest to the exit, probably. It's a good question, and we were just talking about that with my California cousins. And we just left today. You know, the fires in California. What do you leave with? You know, and it's just a question with tornadoes and that kind of thing. And what do we do? It's a reality that we live with.
Are you evading the question?
Yes. Is that a twist on it? Yeah, well, that's a good question. What would you do, Ann, with your work? Would you take yours or somebody else's or what? It's a coffee dog, right?
The dog.
The dog. The dog or the painting of the dog? So yeah, it's something to think about in the heat of the moment. I don't know, but I have other works that are valuable in a different way. So it's just stuff at the end of the day. Ultimately, as living being, humans are the most precious things, and the dogs, cats, that kind of thing. But, anyway, well, I think we have a little bit more time to enjoy the show, wander around, and eat some more goodies there. Cody has some lovely things to offer, and of course, Cody also owns Bon Bon and the Taco Zone and Burger Stand, and the gallery. And so she's amazing, and her husband, and they've been wonderful neighbors and friends over the years, and it's just been lovely. Again, this community of support is just phenomenal. It's not just me, it's just the whole everybody. And Joel, who's right there, who did the video of my dad, some of you have seen that, just tirelessly. And he was my dad's student, and at the time, he was thinking, how did your video camera, and there's Dad's shoes walking up the Natural History Museum. And that's the coolest thing. And the Carol, and his website is Demolition Kitchen, and so if those of you want to go back in time and see the embarrassment and musical groups and all kinds of stuff, he's got an amazing array of videos, and he's working on more things, and he's also working on a documentary of this show. So he's gone around and photographed everything, and we're going to put it together, and I'll narrate over the top of the images for some more stuff, and talk about which painting I would save in a tornado. Which will give me time to think about that. Anyway, well, thank you all so much for coming out tonight.